You are standing on a balcony in Santorini at 6:47 in the morning, and the sun is coming up over the caldera, and the light is doing the thing you have seen in 1,000 photographs and always assumed was slightly exaggerated. It is not exaggerated. It is exactly that. The white of the buildings, and the blue of the domes, and the water below catching the first gold of the day. It is all exactly as advertised, and you are standing in the middle of it in a bathrobe with a coffee that cost €9, and you are thinking, this is it. This is the thing. I am here. You take a photograph, then another. You try to find the angle that captures what your eyes are seeing, and you cannot quite do it, and eventually you put the phone down and just look. For maybe 4 minutes you just look. And it is genuinely, quietly, completely perfect. You will not think about the math for 11 more days. The math will wait. The math is patient. The trip was 18 months in the making. Not because it was complicated to plan. It wasn't. But because you kept almost booking it and then not. The way you almost do a lot of things when the number is large enough to require a conversation with yourself. $3,200 for the flights. Hotels and Airbnbs adding another $2,400 across 11 days. Budget for food, activities, transport on the island, $1,200. Total planned spend, $6,800. You had the $6,800. That was never the question. You had saved it specifically and deliberately over 14 months, $50 here, $200 there, the kind of accumulation that feels slow when you're doing it and then one day becomes the thing that lets you go. You booked it on a Tuesday night in February. It felt like an achievement. It felt like proof of something, that you could want a thing, work toward it, and make it happen. You told 4 people that night. You screenshot the confirmation and looked at it 3 times the following morning. What you didn't budget for, because you never budget for these things, was everything else. The new luggage, because your old bag had a broken zipper and you couldn't take that to Santorini. $430. The sandals, because you couldn't walk cobblestones in what you owned. $87. The sundresses, 2 of them, because Santorini has an aesthetic and you wanted to meet it. $164. The SPF, the travel size everything, the adapters, the nicer sunglasses you'd been meaning to get anyway. Another 200 and something. You're not entirely sure. Those purchases blur. By the time you got on the plane, you had spent $912 more than the number you had saved for. You didn't think about that on the plane. The thing about a dream trip is that you arrive already determined to love it. The decision is made before you land. You have been imagining this for 18 months, and the imagination has done significant work. It has smoothed out the inconveniences in advance, pre-justified every expense, built a version of the experience that you are now simply filling in with real colors and real heat and real euros. The €9 coffee was genuinely good. The €12 cocktails at the sunset spot were genuinely worth sitting with for 2 hours as the light changed. The €70 dinner on the 3rd night was the best meal you have eaten in your adult life, and you are not exaggerating and you would not take it back. What happened was not that you overspent on things that weren't worth it. What happened was subtler and harder to name. What happened was that the context of a dream trip created a version of you who made decisions differently than you make them at home. At home, you would not order the second cocktail without thinking about it. In Santorini, you ordered the second cocktail because you were in Santorini. At home, you would not take a €40 catamaran tour you hadn't planned for. In Santorini, someone mentioned it at breakfast, and you said yes because the trip was already happening. And what was 40 more euros when you were already here? At home, you would not spend 60 euros on a hand-painted ceramic piece in a shop you wandered into. In Santorini, it was beautiful and you were in a beautiful place, and the math felt different there. Suspended, like the normal rules had been paused for the duration. By the time you boarded the flight home, you had spent $4,311 more than your planned budget of $6,800. The total cost of the trip, including the pre-trip purchases, was $12,023. You didn't do that math on the flight home either. You were tired and happy, and you had photographs that hadn't been edited yet, and a ceramic piece wrapped in 6 layers of your clothing in your suitcase, and a tan that would last 2 more weeks. You thought, that was worth it. You thought, I would do it again. You do the math on a Sunday in October, 8 weeks after you land. Not because something made you do it, because you're reviewing your annual finances the way you do every October, the quiet accounting of a year, and the trip is there, unavoidable and large, in the middle of the spreadsheet. You knew it was 12,000. That number has been sitting in the back of your head since you got home. Not loudly, just present. What you haven't done is the second calculation, the one that takes a number and asks, what is this, really? So you do it. You earn, after taxes, roughly $62,000 a year. Divided by 2,000 working hours, that's $31 an hour. The $12,000 the trip cost you in total. Flights, hotels, food, activities, luggage, the sundresses, the ceramic piece, all of it, represents 387 hours of your working life. 387 hours. That is 48 and a half 8-hour workdays. Nearly 10 full working weeks. 2.5 months of your professional life. You sit with that for a while, then you do the next calculation. If you had taken that same $12,000 and invested it in a low-cost index fund at the historical average return, left it alone for 20 years, it would be worth, you run the numbers twice because you don't trust the first result, approximately $65,000. You stare at $65,000 for longer than you stared at the sunrise from the balcony. This is the moment you wish you hadn't done the math. Not because the math is wrong, because the math is exactly right, and now you have to sit with what it means. Here is what the math does not mean. It does not mean the trip was a mistake. It does not mean you should have stayed home. It does not mean that experiences are not worth money, or that the 65,000 in 20 years is more real than the morning on the balcony in Santorini when the light did exactly what you always believed it would do. You know this. You are not going to pretend that compound interest produces the specific quality of a €9 coffee drunk in a bathrobe while the sun rises over water you have wanted to see since you were 22 years old. It doesn't. Numbers don't do that. What the math means is something quieter and less comfortable. What the math means is that you spent $12,000 and you planned for $6,800, and the gap between those two numbers, $4,311, happened without you deciding to let it happen. It happened because the context changed, and the context changed you, and the you in Santorini made decisions that the you in October, sitting at a kitchen table with a spreadsheet, would not have made. The luggage is fine. The luggage was genuinely needed. The sandals, probably necessary. The sundresses, reasonable. These are not the problem. The problem, if you can call it that, is the €40 catamaran tour decided at breakfast. The second cocktail ordered because you were already there. The ceramic piece bought because the moment felt like the kind of moment that deserved a ceramic piece. These are not large individual amounts. Added together, they are the $4,000 gap. They are the 2.5 months of your working life that you did not plan to spend and spent anyway, because the dream had suspended the usual calculation. This is what the math shows you. Not that the trip was wrong, but that a significant portion of what you spent was spent in a different state of mind than the one you use at home. You were, for 11 days, operating under different financial rules that you never consciously chose to apply. And the question that sits with you in October, harder to dismiss than $65,000, is, did you know that going in? The honest answer is no. You knew the trip would be expensive. You knew you would probably spend more than planned, because you always spend more than planned on trips. You had baked in a vague mental allowance for this, the way you bake in extra time for traffic, not with a number, just with a feeling that it would probably be a bit more. What you did not know is how completely the context would override your normal financial instincts. You did not know that being in a beautiful place would feel like permission. You did not know that spending money in Santorini would feel categorically different from spending money on a Tuesday at home. Less real, somehow, less consequential, like it was happening in a separate account that would be reconciled later. It was not in a separate account. It was in the only account there is. Here is what you know now that you didn't know then. Dream trips have a multiplier effect on spending that has nothing to do with the cost of the destination and everything to do with the psychological state they create. The more something has been anticipated, the more permission the anticipation generates. You waited 18 months for this trip, and by the time you arrived, you had pre-authorized yourself for nearly anything, because the thing you were doing was too important to be disrupted by saying no to a catamaran. This is not a character flaw. It is just how this works. And knowing how it works is worth more than any spreadsheet. 8 weeks later, you still have the photographs. The ceramic piece is on a shelf where you can see it from your desk. The tan is gone. The €9 coffee is a memory you return to with genuine warmth and no regret. You do not regret the trip. You would not take it back. The sunrise over the caldera at 6:47 in the morning was worth seeing, and you saw it, and it is yours now in the particular way that experiences become yours, stored somewhere the spreadsheet can't reach. What you do differently now is smaller than you'd expect. You still travel. You still spend money on the things that matter to you. But when you book the next trip, you add a line to the budget that says, suspension fee. A number that represents the version of you who will show up in that place and make different decisions than the version of you who is sitting here right now. You budget for her. You give her some room. And you set a boundary for how much room. It's not a perfect system. Nothing is. But it means the next time you're standing on a balcony somewhere with a coffee and a bathrobe, watching something beautiful happen, you're not doing math in the back of your mind. You're just looking, the way you looked in Santorini, for exactly 4 minutes before you remembered your phone. That part was free. That part has always been free. And it turns out that's the part you remember most.